In 2019, one statistic shook the comic book industry. From April to June of 2019, the Hulk, a character with a history of being beaten by Batman both in combat and in sales, took over the comic book market and surpassed even the caped crusader himself. This was a big deal because no comic really beats Batman in terms of comic book sales, especially in the way that Al Ewing and Joe Bennett's Immortal Hulk did. Most issues that outsell Batman are the first issues of a new series or some event comic involving a ton of superheroes. What made the financial success of Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk so surprising was the fact that the sales bump happened in the middle of its run. After averaging 44,462 units sold between issues 2 to 15, the book suddenly sold an average of 85,458 copies across 4 issues in a 3-month time frame, with 3 of those books beating the main Batman series in terms of sales. Immortal Hulk's domination over Batman for 3 straight months was such alarming and exciting news that entire articles and Reddit posts were dedicated just to discuss this phenomenon. And 5 years later, I think it's still worth discussing. Today, I want to try to find out why the series got a sudden sales bump. I'm going to look at the common ways comic books artificially drive sales and see what methods Immortal Hulk might have utilized to get to the top. Starting with number 1, important numbers. Sometimes the amount of copies a comic book sells doesn't depend on the content within, but the numbers on the outside. If you look at the best-selling comic of each year from 2010 to 2019, most of them have some important number to them. 6 of them are number 1s, meaning the start of a new series. 2 of them are the 1000th issue of their series, namely Action Comics 1000 and Detective Comics 1000. And then you got the outlier that is Walking Dead issue 115, being the best-selling comic in 2013, which just goes to show how big the IP was that year. But Immortal Hulk issues 16 to 19 doesn't contain any issue of notable numerical importance. Unlike Immortal Hulk issue 33, which was the 750th issue of the Hulk, or Daredevil issue 8 released this year, which celebrated the character's 60th anniversary, the stretch of Hulk issues that beat Batman in 2019 didn't have any numerical or temporal advantage that increased its sales. So let's move on to something else. Number 2, crossover. Sometimes 2 superheroes who have their own comic cross over, and to follow the storyline, fans have to buy both monthly comics. A lot of people hate these because it makes them spend more money, but historically speaking, it does improve sales in the short term. In April of 2017, Batman had a crossover with The Flash, and the sales of Flash comics spiked. Flash issues 21 and 22, the issues that were part of the crossover with Batman, had 2 different covers, which boosted sales dramatically. If you add the sales of both covers on the month of their release, The Flash issue 21 sold 174,803 copies, and Flash issue 22 sold 163,767 copies. For context, the Flash comic only sold an average of 54,996 copies across the previous 5 issues before the beginning of the crossover storyline. Now, let's bring back the conversation to Immortal Hulk issues 16 to 19. This comic does not cross over with any other book, but it does feature a bunch of Hulk characters returning. We see the return of Rick Jones, who was experimented on by bad guys to become Abomination. We also see Betty Ross, Bruce's ex-wife, revived as a Red Harpy. Even though prominent side characters do show up in this arc, I don't think it counts as a crossover. It's not even advertised as one. If there was an issue of Immortal Hulk that soared due to featuring prominent characters, it would have been the 7th issue of the series, featuring the Avengers fighting the Hulk. Although it sold well at 48,902 copies, it was nowhere close to the amount of copies Immortal Hulk issues 16 to 19 sold. So we are yet again left with nothing. Let's move forward. Number 3. Variant covers. The best-selling comic book of all time is X-Men #1 by writer Chris Claremont and artist Jim Lee, which was released in 1991 and sold a whopping 8 million copies. X-Men issue 1's success can be attributed to many different factors, the book having legendary creatives behind it, the issue being a #1, the comic's launch being at the height of the speculator/investor boom, and a gimmick that skyrocketed sales to the stratosphere. The comic came in 4 different covers that, when placed side by side, formed an epic image of the X-Men fighting against Magneto. This gimmick prompted fans and collectors to grab all the variant covers. Without them, I don't think X-Men issue 1 would have been the success it became. Now, connecting covers and variant covers don't boost sales as much anymore, but they still cause bumps here and there. In the case of Immortal Hulk issue 16, it actually had a 1 in 25 wraparound variant cover. What this number means is that for every 25 copies of Immortal Hulk issue 16 comic book shops ordered, they would receive this unique copy with a unique cover by Joe Bennett of Bruce Banner, painfully and grotesquely morphing into the Hulk. This could explain why Immortal Hulk issue 15 only sold 53,120 copies, and issue 16 sold 90,305 copies. But it doesn't explain why the series sold incredibly well afterward. So let's test a different hypothesis. Number 4. First appearance. Look at this graph. This represents the sales figures of the Teen Titans series relaunched in 2016. You see that random sales spike in issue 12? The reason for its existence is because of this guy, the Batman Who Laughs, who was being heavily pushed by DC in 2017. Teen Titans issue 12 is one of the character's first appearances, so fans who were interested to see this new character in full action and speculators who wanted to resell this comic in the future all bought a random issue of a series they weren't collecting. This caused a minor sales jump for the book that wasn't reflective of the comic's quality, but the hype of a character's first appearance. Now, looking at the Immortal Hulk, well, we don't have any of that. The whole series is more of an homage to all of the Hulk's previous personalities and side characters, rather than, a breeding ground of new marketable heroes and villains. So, it means we got to move on. Again. Number 5. Creative team. So, the creative team behind Immortal Hulk is the writer/artist duo of Al Ewing and Joe Bennett. Artists and writers do bump up the sales of certain comics, but in our case, we're focusing on Immortal Hulk issues 16, 17, and 19, which were made by Al Ewing and Joe Bennett. There were no special guest artists or writers that worked on these particular issues. You can make the case that the series' financial success as a whole was due to Al Ewing and Joe Bennett's presence, but it doesn't explain the series' sudden, incredible sales. Actually, it seems Immortal Hulk shouldn't have sold particularly well based on its creators. Looking at the sales statistics of other Marvel comic books that Al Ewing worked on before Immortal Hulk, I didn't find good results. His 18-issue New Avengers series sold alright, steadily declining over the course of its run. His 12-issue series Royals sold pretty abysmally, with steep sales drops and the last 3 issues selling an average of 11,258 copies. His 2017 6-issue miniseries on Rocket Raccoon with art by Adam Gorham didn't sell well either, with an average of 15,941 copies reaching comic shelves every month. At least when it comes to Al Ewing's comics, there was no previous history of spectacular financial success before the Hulk. So Immortal Hulk having amazing sales numbers with a few issues even surpassing Batman is not something predictable in the slightest. So after a bunch of minutes trying to figure out why Immortal Hulk beat Batman, what do we find? Nothing. There is no sales gimmick that can be used to fully explain why the Hulk beat Batman for 3 months in a row, which leaves us with what I believe to be the coolest conclusion, that there was no gimmick used at all. The boost in sales the series got wasn't due to some marketing strategy by a competent salesperson, or at least not just that. The book sold well because people absolutely loved it. Immortal Hulk outselling Batman might have been the financial highlight of the series, but the book overall defied general sales trends of comics. Look at the sales figures for the 33 issues of Immortal Hulk we have data on. This graph does not make sense. When comparing it to the first 33 issues of other mainstream comics like the Batman relaunch in 2016, the Star Wars relaunch in 2015, or the Amazing Spider-Man relaunch in 2018, the sales trend of Immortal Hulk really stands out. Unlike the sales of other titles, Immortal Hulk's first issue was not its top selling, and sales didn't decrease as the series progressed. Instead, they stabilized, even increasing as the series went on. While issues 1 to 10 sold an average of about 48,496 copies, the next 10 issues sold an average of 64,656 copies every month, while the series saw a decline in average sales afterward, with issues 21 to 23 selling around 54,894 copies each. The fact that the book sold better in this later period than in its first 10 issues speaks volumes to the stranglehold the Immortal Hulk had on people. I cannot overstate just how massive Immortal Hulk was as it was coming out. Every month, comic book fans would gather round and gush about how great it was, how it brought them back into the medium, how it became the monthly comic they looked forward to the most despite not considering themselves as fans of the Hulk prior to this series. Striking and grotesque action sequences featuring the monstrous Hulk drawn by Joe Bennett would trend on social media, alongside some of the book's impactful dialogue and commentary on subjects like identity, trauma, and politics written by Al Ewing. The buzz around the book managed to even bring me to read it, and I think it is one of the best comic books Marvel or DC has ever put out. After I read the last issue of the series, I was so mind-blown and awestruck by the whole run that I just had to pace around my house to internalize it. It's a story about the Hulk, who in this series cannot be killed. Many different parties, from the mighty Avengers to the nefarious UFOs, try to take him down, but no matter what situation he's put in, the Hulk manages to find a horrifying way to survive. In terms of action, Immortal Hulk is one of the most exciting, engaging, and terrifying comics out there. Every issue has some shocking reveal or epic fight scene that hooks you to read the next. Joe Bennett's grotesque and detailed artwork gives the comic's action sequences an incredible sense of darkness, drama, and impact, where you feel the weight of every action taken in battle and the horrifying repercussions the individuals who receive them have to face. But what's just as surprising is the book's emotional and narrative depth. Al Ewing brings us to see the inner workings of Bruce Banner's mind and all his alternate personalities that were formed as a result of different traumatic events. I have never felt more for the Hulk than when reading this legendary run. We see the Devil Hulk take over as a result of Banner's hopelessness, and as he unleashes his rage on humanity and our flawed society with a plan to break everything and start over, we can't help but feel angry and disappointed too. When the leader takes over Bruce Banner's psyche, leaving only Joe Fixit and Savage Hulk to rot, we can't help but root for the Hulks to overcome the leader's wrath. When the Hulk cries out to God in the comic's last issue, begging him for an answer as to why he's broken and in pain and why everyone around him has to suffer as a result of his existence, we drown in the character's agony and sorrow as well. Just as Immortal Hulk is an exciting and riveting superhero comic about an unstoppable monster wrecking everything in its path, it also manages to be an introspective and vulnerable tale about trauma, pain, hope, and forgiveness that not only applies to the Hulk, but to us. The biggest feat Immortal Hulk accomplishes is multifaceted excellence, tackling deep subjects like dissociative identity disorder and the current political climate in interesting and compelling ways, while also being filled with some of the most exciting and horrifying action to ever grace the pages of the comic book medium. The fact that Immortal Hulk defied the standard trend of comic book sales is pretty impressive. The series beating out Batman for 3 straight months is an even wilder achievement. But these sales statistics have value to me because they reveal the kind of story Immortal Hulk was as it was ongoing. An epic, exciting tale that captivated a growing audience month to month as it unraveled. A series that financially and critically could not be killed. Not due to some gimmick or sales trick, but because of the book's sheer quality that was above and beyond everyone's expectation. 3 years after the series' end, it is still lauded as a modern classic, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Being praised not only for being one of the Hulk's best stories, but for being one of the best tales that the comic book medium has to offer, Immortal Hulk has a long and unstoppable path ahead of influencing and inspiring the hearts and minds of all those who it's made for. Its impact, monstrous. Its lifespan, immortal. My name is Joshua C, and I will see you in the next comic book video.